Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to another session of Youth Perspectives, where we discuss relevant issues that are, relevant to the youth of America today. So today we're actually going to continue our topic from last session. If you weren't there, I'll just, give you a recap. We talked some things about parents and the rights of parents and how we should treat parents. We talked about the punishments of not treating your parents well, not fulfilling their rights. We also discussed, briefly what to do if your parents have passed away and you still want to receive the reward for, blessing your parents and being a good child towards them, even if your parents are not in this world anymore. So, we had a lot of content last session as well, and we didn't have time to cover all of it. So today we're going to kind of continue off of that and finish this topic of parenthood today. And for those of you who did not see the last session, don't worry, I will be reviewing some things that we discussed last session. Both sessions, because it is the same topic. So again, I'm just gonna reiterate that the reason we're doing this topic is because it is so relevant to every single youth, and I think personally this topic is the most relevant because when speakers come and they talk about these topics that the youth are interested in, like for example, spending time with na-mahram. Some youth are guilty of that, or wearing hijab or not wearing hijab, or listening to music, or doing or namaz, or all these things, right? That the youth are kind of, some of them do it, some of them don't. Some people struggle with these things, but I feel like the topic of parents is so important because every youth, no matter who you are, where you come from, you have parents, right? You were born, you had two parents who raised you, and for those of you, maybe if you didn't have both parents to raise you, you at least had one, or for those of you who didn't, you at least had primary caregivers, or even if your parents have passed away, we will discuss in this session what to do in that case as well. So everyone at some point had parents, they came from parents, so that's something that every youth, regardless of who you are, you can relate to this topic. So this is why I found that really interesting, and I thought that we should dedicate like 2 whole sessions to this topic because it's just that important. And not only is it relevant to everyone, but just Islamically, the importance of parents is you see it in the Quran, you see it in Hadith, you see it in stories, you see it in so many places because it just has that much value, and that is just all the more reason for us to take out time to understand the rights of our parents and to really live every day trying to fulfill those rights. So we're just going to dive right in. And I'm just going to mention, why do parents just deserve a lot of respect? So we're not looking at an Islamic perspective. We're just looking just generally, from a logical explanation. Why do parents deserve so much respect? And just logically speaking, it just makes sense because the fact that they raised you, your mother held you in her womb for 9 months, they financially, they had to take care of you, like they were so emotionally invested in you. They didn't care, and I'm going to read, another hadith, they didn't care like if they had shelter or not, if they were clothed or not, or if they had food or not. They always put you first, and they put you before their own selves, and to commit to you like that for your entire childhood, and even till today, a lot of us, who still live with our parents are just constantly worried about us. They're concerned about us. They want what's best for us. Even if it means they won't get what's best for them, they just want us to succeed in life. And that's something that is just so wonderful, and we can never really truly understand that until and unless we become parents ourselves. And I've heard that from so many people, like so many people who have become mothers. They said that, okay, now, 25 years later, now I'm realizing how much my mom, how much she worked to raise me, how much she went through to ensure that I had everything that I needed. And I've talked to people, my relatives or my cousins who are mothers now, they said that honestly, they never really comprehended how much their mothers did until they became mothers themselves. And I'm pretty sure the same goes for fathers as well. So honestly, this is a role that we can never comprehend unless we're in that position ourselves. So until then, we have to really appreciate what they do for us, and we have to understand that they sacrifice so many things. Even if they don't tell us, they sacrifice so many things for our well-being. And you see this in the movies, right? Or in books, you see parents, they have financial struggles, but they don't tell their kids because they don't want their children to worry. We have parents who work multiple jobs just to ensure that their children have enough money to have food and like go have an education, right? College. Parents are in debt and they take out loans just so that their kids can have that education, just so that their kids can have that quality of a lifestyle that they could never have for themselves. And especially if you're someone who comes from a culture, right, that if your parents are not like entirely American, if they came from a different country, that they worked so hard ever since they entered this nation. They worked jobs, they started like from the bottom, and they just made their way to this level where you can like live comfortably, because they just wanted to create that foundation for their family. And they just, that in itself is so deserving of respect when you think about it. Your parents they did so much for you. So that's like just a logical explanation. But Islamically, why does Islam place so much importance on parents? And I'm going to mention actually something that I mentioned the last session, that it's the same reason that I just mentioned. Islam places importance on parents because they cared for you, they raised you with the standards of Islam, they raised you with the love of the Ahlul Bayt, they taught you how to pray, how to read namaz, how to do dua, how to read Quran. They taught you so many things. Or even if they didn't teach you those things, they made sure you had the resources and materials to learn those things, right? So if you had a Quran teacher, or if you went to an Islamic school or Sunday school, your parents were like paying for these things to ensure not only that you had clothes and food and education, but you also had all these Islamic things in your upbringing, and that you were raised as a proper Shia of the Ahlul Bayt. So that's really important, especially in this time in this country. It's so hard because Muslims are not everywhere, so they have to really go out and find good Islamic schools, find Sunday schools. They have to go and find good Quran teachers, or if they couldn't do that, they had to take out time from their life to sit down and teach you these things, regardless of all the other non-Islamic things you were exposed to. So raising you as a Muslim in itself was such a big deal for your parents, because they did it in this country and they weren't even used to how the society is. They came from, if your parents, like I said, if you come from a different culture, your parents moved from different countries, their whole lifestyle was different over there. But when they moved here, they were kind of almost overwhelmed and shocked of how different it was. And yet they still did everything in their power to raise you with those Islamic values. So if we take a moment to understand what that means, right? They're trying to navigate their own life, like how to pay taxes, how to buy houses, bills, all these things. And on top of that, now they have a kid and they have to make sure their kid is taken care of in all those like financial, educational aspects. But also on top of that, they have to raise their child as a Muslim in a society that is entirely like non-Islamic. So that was really, really, really just, it hit me when I realized that. So like from an Islamic perspective, your parents have so much value. And then we also mentioned last segment, what if your parents are not Shia, right? And this is actually what I wanted to mention, that even if your parents are not Shia, you have to be good to your parents, even if they are kafirs. So, Islamically, right, there's, Muslims and there's non-Muslims and there's kafirs, right? And we obviously, we're not so like fond of people who like don't worship Allah, who worship multiple gods. But even if your parents are kafirs, parents are so important that you still have to respect them. So there's a verse in Surah Luqman that says, "And if they contend with you that you should associate with me what you have no knowledge of, do not obey them, and keep company with them in this world kindly." So this is Surah Luqman, Surah 31, verse 15. So this is saying, if your parents are telling you to associate others with me, don't listen to them, but still treat them in this world with kindness. So even if they're like blatantly, disrespecting, the rights of, Allah, they're saying, oh, Allah doesn't exist, or there's more than one God, and they're like pushing you to associate with beings other than Allah, then you still shouldn't be disrespectful towards them. You have to be kind towards them, even despite that, right? So that's something that's really, really interesting. Also, here's one for if your parents they're not kafirs, but they're not Shia either. So someone asked Imam Raza alayhi salam whether one is allowed to pray for one's parents if they had not followed the truth and if they weren't Shia, right? And I know like maybe a lot of us do have that issue, right? If we're converts and if our parents, maybe they weren't kafir, but they were non-Muslim, maybe they were Christians, or they were, they're Sunni or things like that. They're just not Shia, they're not the faith that we have. We often question, how should we treat them, right? So Imam Raza alayhi salam, he replied, if they are dead, pray for them and give sadaqah on their behalf, give charity on their behalf. And if they are alive, keep them happy. So that's something that I found really interesting. So keep them happy as long as you're not following them when they're telling you to sin. As long as you're not sinning, just do whatever you can to keep them happy. Stay kind to them, respect them. And if they are dead, give sadaqah on their behalf, pray namaz for them, and they will receive the blessings. Because if they have a child who's a Shia, right? Often I know people have that worry, oh my God, my parents weren't Shia, but I am. What's going to happen to them in the next life? If you are Shia, and if your parents are blessed with having a child who is Shia, then you should pray for them, and definitely the blessings will go to them, and they will see the benefits of that in the next life. So you can still help your parents, even if they weren't necessarily Shia in this world. So there's also another hadith by the Imam. Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam. One person, Jabir ibn Abdullah, came and he reports that someone asked Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, my parents are against the truth. This is what they went to the Imam and they told him this. My parents are against the truth, meaning they are not the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt. And the Imam replied, be good towards them like you would be towards our Shias. So I mentioned this last segment as well, but I'm mentioning it again because I just think it's so beautiful that the Imam is saying, just like how you would treat a Shia, treat them the same way. So he's almost categorizing your parents in the category of Shia because of how much respect you owe them, how much rights you have to fulfill when it comes to them. So that's just something that we have to really take into account. Also, I'm going to mention another hadith from Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam. He said, Allah has not given superiority to a mu'min in 3 circumstances. So meaning there are 3 situations where a mu'min and a non-mu'min are, they're equal. First, to return what has been entrusted to you for safekeeping, whether it belongs to a mu'min or a kafir, right? So if someone trusts you with someone that's amanah, you have to give it back to them regardless of their religion. Secondly, fulfilling an oath, whether given to a mu'min or a kafir, so you cannot lie. You have to keep your promise regardless of the person's faith. And third, doing good to the parents, whether they be mu'min or kafir. So that's just, again, just reiterating exactly what I said, that you have to really respect your parents regardless of that. So I just wanted to mention those things in case you are someone whose parents weren't Shia. Don't worry, you still have to respect them. Even if they aren't alive today, you can still do so many things to benefit them. So just food for thought, if your parents are Shia, imagine how much respect, they deserve, because, they do follow the Ahlul Bayt. So they're even higher in that status, they're even more respected because of that. So just keep that in mind, that whether they're Shia or not, Muslim or not, Muslim, kafir or not, you still have to give them that respect, to the point where actually even in this hadith they're saying that a mu'min and a non-mu'min are not even superior to each other in these circumstances. So if you had a kafir and you had a mu'min, none of them are superior, they're just equal when it comes to terms of how they should be respected. So that's actually pretty interesting, because that's the only place in Islam, I think, that kafirs and Muslims are actually on the same level. So food for thought. So just think about it, and I'm just going to throw a question out there. We talked about this last session, but just think about what you would have done if you didn't have parents, right? And for those of you who didn't grow up with parents, you still had a primary caregiver. Imagine if you didn't have someone to look out for you. Imagine if you didn't have someone who cared for you and you had to really fend off for yourself. That's actually very scary. It's a big world out there, and there's so many things that as a young child you obviously couldn't care about yourself. You couldn't really navigate through the world on your own. So the fact that your parents were there for you, just if you could list all the things they did for you, you would never end that list. It's just too extensive. So food for thought, really, just go home and just think about it in your free time. What all have my parents done for me? And did I ever do justice to them by, treating them kindly and respecting them and fulfilling their rights for all the things that they did, right? Are you grateful towards them? Some kids are very ungrateful. I've seen some of my friends, the way they speak to their parents, it's as if their parents are inferior to them. The way my friends, some of them speak to their parents, one of my friends was on the phone, and the way she was talking, I thought she was almost scolding one of her friends. But when she closed the phone, I asked, who is that? She said, oh, that was my mom. And she sounded so, my friend sounded so annoyed at her mother, and she was speaking disrespectfully and almost angrily to her mother. And I was upset. I was like, do I even want to be friends with someone like that? And I decided, I don't want to be with, that's not a good person to be friends with. So just food for thought. And now I'm going to mention a lot of Islamic perspectives on how exactly are we supposed to treat our parents. So I know I mentioned, parents are so important, even if they're Kafir, even if they're non-Muslim, if they're Sunni versus Shia, anything. If you have parents, they deserve respect. And now I'm going to talk about what do I mean by this, right? We hear, fulfill their rights, be kind, keep them happy. What does that mean, right? So I'm going to go specifically and mention some things. I'm going to start off by mentioning two verses from the Quran, three actually. So the first verse is from Surah 17, verse 23. I mentioned this last time as well. And the verse goes, "The Lord has decreed that you worship none but Him and that you be kind to parents." So we talked about this last time, how Allah, right after the duty you have towards Allah, Allah is mentioning the duty you have towards your parents. So in the same verse, Allah didn't even separate the verses. In the same exact verse, He mentions how you're supposed to be towards Allah, and then immediately after that, how you are supposed to be with your parents. So that just really highlights how important respect towards parents is, right? Be kind to your parents. Also, these two next verses, this is from Surah 31, verses 14 to 15. "And we have enjoined on man to be good to his parents. In travail upon travail his mother bore him, and in 2 years was his weaning. Hear the command. Show gratitude to me and to your parents. To me is your final goal." And then the next verse goes on to say, "But if they strive to make you join in worship with me things of which you have no knowledge, do not obey them. Yet bear with them company in this life with justice and consideration, and follow the way of those who turn to me in love. In the end, the return of you all is to me, and I will tell you the truth and meaning of all that you did." So this is like a very, very interesting verse, because it's, again, like I said, it's mentioning the duties you have towards Allah, and then right after that, the duties of your parents. And even the Quranic verse is saying that even if your parents are telling to enjoin others to me, still treat them with justice in this world. Treat them with, like love and affection and kindness. And that just reiterates yet again how important parents are. So then we'll move on to some, hadiths and things like that. I'm going to actually mention something that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said concerning, people who treat their parents right. So Moses, so this was in the following book of Amali. Moses saw a beautiful face in the shade of heaven. This beautiful face in the shade of heaven, and he asked whose shadow was over him. And he was told he was the one who really treated his parents well, and he had never gossiped or caused disunion. So on top of, treating parents well, this is also about not gossiping, not causing, disunity among the Muslims. And we actually covered gossiping in another session. But here he's saying that one who treated his parents well. So in heaven, they're going to have they're going to really, really have such a good experience in heaven. They're going to really live a good life in the next world because of how they treated their parents. Also, the sixth Imam alayhi salam said, "If you desire death to be easy to you, visit your relatives and be kind to your parents. Then the angel of death will be told to take it easy on you, and you will not be poor during your lifetime." So this is talking about the benefits of this life as well, meaning you won't be poor in this lifetime, and also death will be easy for you. So that's something that's really interesting, because so far we've mentioned 3 stages of life where being good to your parents will benefit you, right? 1 is in this life, meaning you won't be poor in this life. 2, your death will be easy for you. So when the angel of death comes, he's not going to be hard on you, right? We've heard so many stories about the horrors of death, how scary it can be for people, who don't follow the right path, or people who have sins. But death will be easy for you through the kindness of your parents. And also lastly, that in heaven, that you're going to be having this really high status. So we see in this life, during death, and also in heaven. So this is just something that's really interesting, because in every stage of your life, being kind to your parents will really benefit you, regardless of, if you're alive or in barzakh, or if you're dying, or if you're in the grave. And, think on the day of judgment as well. And there's so many hadith that actually mention each of these stages of life, right? Life, the process of dying, going in the grave, being resurrected, going in the barzakh, the day of judgment, and heaven. These 6 stages, and there are countless hadith that actually mention in each of these stages, being kind to your parents will actually benefit you in every single one of these 6 stages. So really, there's no way you can go wrong if you're treating your parents right, if you're maybe sacrificing some of your desires, your opinions to listen to them. Because when you were being raised, they sacrificed everything they had for your priorities. So maybe now it's time for you to, now that you have that understanding, you've reached that age, you should maybe put aside some of your wants, some of your opinions, and listen to what your parents are saying and care about their well-being and their best interest, right? And your parents still care about you, so it's not like if you care about them and you put them before like your own self, it's not like they're going to take advantage of you. Definitely not. They're still going to put you before them, and you can never really outdo your parents on how much they love you. And then the seventh Imam said, a man asked the Prophet to explain the rights of a father. He said, do not call him by his name. Do not walk ahead of him. Do not sit down before he does, and do not swear at him. This is in Bahar al-Anwar, volume 74, page 45. Also, there's another there's another hadith by Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. He said, 3 things are obligatory for children regarding their parents. They should always be grateful for them, right? Like I mentioned in the beginning, they should always be grateful to them. They should accept their advice on all matters except sinning. And they should always wish them well. So just like we said, right? If your parents are telling you to sin, don't listen to them. But for everything else, if they're giving you advice, you should take their advice and always wish them well. Always wish the best for them, do dua for them, things like that. So those are the 3 things that are obligatory. They're not even optional. You have to do them towards your parents. And then lastly, I want to mention, this is a very interesting story. Because maybe at this point you're realizing, oh my God, what if I'm not a good enough kid? I didn't treat my parents well. I'm going to mention something. A man told the Prophet, there is no evil deed which I have not done. Is there any way for me to repent? So this man has done all the bad deeds in the world, and the man's like, is there any redemption for me? The Prophet asked him if his parents were alive, and he replied that his mother had passed away, but his father was alive. Then the Prophet told the man to go treat his father kindly so that his sins would be forgiven. When the man left the mosque, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said he would have been closer to forgiveness by God if his mother was still alive. And then also another incident, that Moses was asked Allah for some recommendations 3 times. So Prophet Musa asked God for recommendations 3 times. Then he was twice recommended to treat his mother well and once to treat his father well. The story is also in Bahar al-Anwar, volume 13. So that's just really interesting how like treating your parents well, even if you've committed like so many sins, you can erase all your sins and be given forgiveness if you treat your parents well. Even if one of them has passed away, obviously treating your mother well is like more valued, but treat your father well as well. Treat both of your parents well. And if they have passed away, at least if one of them is alive, do that as well. And at the end, we'll address if both of them are have passed away. How do we treat them? So 2 more things. The sixth Imam said, looking meanly at parents causes damnation. So you can't even look at them in a mean way. And then Imam Baqir alayhi salam said, one is not free in the following 3 cases. He is not free to do as he pleases in regard to what he is entrusted with, his promise, and being kind to his parents. So if you remember those 3 circumstances where mu'min and kafir are the same? These same things, right? If they trusted you with something, if you promise them something, and if they are your parents. Same exact thing we see here. How you have to really, you have no option in this. And then also I want to mention something from Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, and this is a common one. We've heard this. This talks about, the terms of what your mother did for you. So note the following regarding your mother. She carried you for nearly 9 months in her womb. No one else could do so. She dedicated her love to you. No one else would do so. She protected you with all her existence, fed you and was hungry herself, gave you things to drink, and she remained thirsty herself. She clothed you and did not care for her own clothing. She felt hot but protected you from heat. She stayed up to care for you at night and protected you in all circumstances so that she may have a child like you. You cannot be grateful enough for all she did unless God helps you. So this is just so interesting. It talks about really how you treat your mothers and the rights of your mothers, and just the fact that you have to be grateful for them. So that's just something that I wanted to mention, because I just found that's so beautiful of how like Islam really recognizes all the things the mother goes through, and Islam gives her that status, right? You hear heaven is under the feet of the mother. Right? That's just something that's just like we can't even comprehend what that means, because honestly the things your mother goes through for that. So also I just want to mention some like actual like rulings on specific scenarios when it comes to parents. For example, this is a common one, and I myself have noticed this in my own life, and I actually didn't know the answer, but here it is given. If it is time for prayers and the parents would like to get some work done, it is necessary to carry out the orders before offering namaz. Here again, the offering of namaz at the earliest is mustahab, whereas obedience to parents is wajib. So if fazilat time is here and you have to pray, but your parents say, oh, I need help with something, don't think, oh, Allah's there, the angels are waiting, I have to go pray, fazilat time is so important. No, praying at fazilat is important. It's mustahab. Do it if you can. But if your parents are telling you to do something, that's wajib on you. It's not even mustahab like praying on fazilat. It is wajib, and you have to obey your parents. So if you're in a circumstance where you have to listen to your parents or pray namaz on time, listen to them first, because it is haram if you don't, right? So listen to them, then pray, right? But then again, if they're telling you to do something to the point where namaz is becoming khaza, then that's a sin, then definitely pray. But in terms of just something being fazilat, you have to listen to them first, listen to what they have to say, help them, and then go on and do your namaz. Also, another interesting thing, one must forego recommended fasts if the father disallows them. So if your father doesn't allow you to do recommended or mustahab fasts, then you can't. And with that being said, you have to acquire permission from your parents when you are doing mustahab fasts. And if your father doesn't allow you, then you are not allowed to do that. Think about that. It's not like you're going to miss out on the sawab of the mustahab fast, because you are actually obeying your father instead of doing a mustahab fast. So again, remember, obeying parents is wajib, while praying on fazilat or doing mustahab fast is mustahab. So always go with the wajib deed, right? And obeying your father will have more, benefit in the eyes of Allah, because you are doing something that is wajib. Also, in the matter regarding vows and promises, if the parents are against it, then one must not disobey them. So when you're promising someone or keeping a vow, right, that's almost like an amanat. You have to really keep your end of the promise. But if your parents are not allowing you to keep that promise, you cannot. And also, lastly, it is the duty of the son to ensure that he causes no harm to his parents. And if someone else intends to harm them, the son must do everything in his capacity to ward off the harm. So protect your parents, because, they obviously did everything in their power to protect you. Now I'm going to mention something specifically in respect to parents. So, as it is wajib to fulfill the rights of the parents, it's also necessary to give them due respect and honor. So I'm going to mention some numerous traditions that have been recorded from the Ahlul Bayt. So, for example, one must not address the parents by their names. However, they can be addressed by their title. So don't address your parents by their names, right? Don't be like, oh, hey, Fatima or Muhammad. Don't call them by their names. You have to address them by their title, right? Like, oh, mom, dad, or whatever you call your parents. One must not precede them while walking, nor should one sit down before them. So this is very interesting, because sometimes we take that for granted. We think it's no big deal, but if we should not sit down before your parents sit down, let them sit down first. While having meals, one should not begin before the parents. Hazrat Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam did not have meals with his mother for the fear that he may pick a morsel which she intended to. So let your parents eat before you. One must never sit with one's back to our parents in a gathering. So that's actually considered disrespectful if you're turning your back towards someone. So never do that to your parents. And here's another one. Obviously, while speaking, one's voice should not rise above the voice of one's parents. That's just a given, right? Raising your voice against someone is disrespectful. So especially with your parents, who are the most deserving of respect, you shouldn't do that. One should not do anything that would cause the parents to become the end of criticism. We must not insult the parents of others, or they would insult our parents in retaliation. So not only is this telling us to not, disrespect our parents, it's telling us to not disrespect other people's parents as well. Because if we disrespect their parents, then they might disrespect ours. So we have to protect our parents in that way. Never say anything that would cause your parents to be insulted or criticized. So protect them, protect their honor, protect their dignity, right? So on top of honoring them, you have to protect their honor as well. Also, these are some things that are considered disrespectful towards parents. One, for example, not providing them with necessities, thus compelling them to beg for them. So if your parents become old and you're not taking care of them, and you don't provide them with the things they need to the point where they have to go and ask you for it, that's disrespectful, right? Obviously, pay attention to what your parents need and fulfill that for them before they come to you and ask. Not inviting them to a function where others have been invited, right? Why would you not invite your parents, right? Invite them. Not getting presents for them from a place where one had been to on a journey. So just out of etiquette, I'm pretty sure we're all familiar with this. If we go somewhere, we bring back, souvenirs, or we bring gifts for people, like our friends or relatives. Bring them for your parents as well. Actually, the sources say that all these above acts are actually haram. So things that are disrespectful, that's actually these things that I mentioned, right? Not providing them with necessities, not inviting them to a function, not getting them presents. In actually some cases, these are considered haram. Also, these 4 more things that I already mentioned before: turning away from the parents with disdain, right? If you're angry and you turn away from them, that's haram. To sit with one's back towards parents, to speak in a voice louder than parents, and to walk ahead of the parents. So this is really, really important. But I'm going to mention this one point, right? So these things that I mentioned are haram, but I want to mention one point, which is very important. If any of these things do not cause disrespect or displeasure, they are allowed. However, to refrain from them is mustahab. Okay, so I'm not going to throw around the term, this is wajib, this is haram. If your parents are not disrespected or displeased by these things, right? So if you walk ahead of them and they really don't care, it is allowed, but it is mustahab to refrain from them. So just that's important, because some people's parents are very strict, some people's parents are not, right? And maybe culturally, some people's parents are very, very strict, but here in America, like, I feel like if I sat down before my parents wouldn't even care. They wouldn't even remember. They don't care, right? If I had kids, they sat before me, I wouldn't care either. So you know your parents. So if you think that doing certain things won't disrespect them or displease them, it's allowed. But if you refrain from them, just for the sake of respecting them, that would be mustahab for you. So just keep that in mind. So that's something that you have to really know, that you have to know what your parents want in terms of respect and pleasure. So you know what it is. As long as you are not doing anything that displeases them or causes them displeasure, then you're good to go. So I just want to say that, right? I don't want you to worry about, oh my God, these things are haram, and sometimes I eat before my parents, oh my God. So don't worry about that, so just I just wanted to clear that up, because when I was reading this, I got scared, because as a kid, I feel like sometimes I would walk and my parents would be like behind me, but sometimes my parents would purposely tell me to walk in front of them. They were never disrespected because of that. So that's something that I wanted to mention, that as every person's situation is different, so it's not like doing one thing is just universally haram, right? Depending on what you think, what you know will displease your parents or cause them disrespect, then keep away from those things. And it is mustahab if you keep away from them, away from all these things that I listed, even if your parents don't care about it. It is mustahab if you stay away from them, just for the sake of Allah, for the sake of respecting them as well. So now we're going to mention what are the detrimental effects of not treating your parents right. So this is actually really, really important. If you're disobedient to your parents, what does that mean? So I just want to mention that, for example, if you are disobedient to parents, there's so many sins for that. I'm just going to mention a few hadiths concerning this matter over here. The Holy Prophet said, "Beware, abstain from angering the parents. The fragrance of paradise is perceived even at a distance of 1,000 years, but those who are disobedient to parents and those who cut off ties with relatives will not be able to smell it." Also, he said, "One who displeases the parents, it is as if he displeased Allah. And one who angers both his parents, it is as if he angered Allah." So Allah's pleasure with you is related to the pleasure your parents have in you as well. Elsewhere it is mentioned, "One who hurts his parents hurts me, and one who hurts me has hurt Allah, and the one who hurts Allah is accursed." So again, relating parents to Prophet, to Allah. Also the Prophet said, "Allah will not speak to 3 kinds of people on the day of judgment, neither will he have mercy on them, nor will he purify their sins." Now, just remember how scary it is to be away from the mercy of Allah, and these people will be away from the mercy of Allah. "There is for them a horrible punishment, chastisement." These 3 types of people are the believers in destiny, the drunkards, and those who disobey their parents. So just that as well. Additionally, Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam said, "Allah will not accept the namaz of the person who stares angrily at his parents, even though their parents may be unjust." So if your parents aren't just towards you, if they oppress you in some way, you cannot stare angrily at them, because your namazes will not even be accepted. So that's actually interesting. Also, additionally, Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam said, accursed is the one who beats his parents, accursed is the one who distresses his parents. Because unfortunately, there are some youth who have the audacity to actually physically hurt their parents, which is just crazy. And I know most of us, almost all of us, are not responsible of doing that. But unfortunately, there are people out there, and I've heard of stories where people have, astaghfirullah, they've actually physically, like they hit their parents or they beat their parents, which is just unimaginable. That's upsetting. Now I'm going to mention something which is actually really common, not common, but it's something that we've all gone through, and this is when there's a disagreement amongst the parents. So if for example you have to obey both of your parents, but your mom is telling you something, your dad is telling you something, and you're like, oh my god, I don't want to displease them, what do I do? Because either way, one of them will not be happy, I'm going to commit a sin, right? You're scared, right? You don't want to displease any of your parents. But if there is a disagreement, you should try to satisfy both of them as much as possible. So try to don't completely side with one parent, even if you agree with that parent, right? Just try your best to satisfy both of them. However, if it is not possible, then the wish of the mother should be given precedence, right? And there's reasons why her rights far exceed those of the father. She's also more deserving of obedience, things like that. There's so many reasons of that as well. But if there is a disagreement, then definitely try to satisfy them both. But if you can't, give precedence to your mother, but also make sure your father doesn't feel disrespected because of that. So and there are reasons for that as well, but due to time we can't. Lastly, to kind of wrap up this topic, I do want to talk about rights of the parents after their death. So for those of you who your parents are not in this world anymore, for those of you who have their parents in this world, just remember that that is a blessing, and please, that's a blessing that Allah has given you, and please take advantage of that blessing. Treat them well during this lifetime, because you will get so many blessings for that. But for those of you whose parents have passed away, there are 3 rights that they have. First is to carry out the wajib acts which they did not perform during their lifetime, like namaz, roza, hajj, and the repayment of debts. So that's the right you have towards your parents. Secondly, to act on their will and testament. Obviously, if they have a will or testament, you have to act upon it. And thirdly, to perform various good deeds for their salvation, like to give sadaqah, to perform charitable acts, to carry out recommended mustahab acts on their behalf. So in short, one should strive to the utmost in doing good deeds on their behalf, so Allah may shower His blessings and mercy on them. So this goes back to even if your parents are not Shia or non-Muslim, just do as much as you can, do mustahab things for them so that Allah can shower His blessings on them even after they are dead. So Hazrat Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam also said, certainly if a person is good to his parents when they are alive but forsakes them after they die and does not repay their debts or pray for their forgiveness, Allah will record aqi walidain in the account of his deeds. On the other hand, if a person is aqi walidain when they are alive but after their death repays their debts and prays for their forgiveness and salvation, Allah will include him among the righteous people. And aqi walidain means people, someone who you disrespect your parents, you don't treat them well, and that's a group of cursed people. There's so much punishment for the aqi walidain. But this this hadith is saying that even if you were an aqi walidain but you really respect your parents even after they die, you will be able to redeem yourself. And if you respected your parents while they were alive but you don't pray for them after they have passed away, then you will be part of that group of cursed people. So please take care of that fact and know that even during their lifetime, even after their death, you still have a responsibility towards your parents, right? There's also one hadith I want to mention from Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam. He said, what prevents you from serving your parents in their life and death? The Holy Prophet remarks about the goodness to parents after death. Perform their namaz. If some wajib prayers have been omitted by them, the eldest son should perform them himself or have them fulfilled by someone else on payment. However, if no wajib prayer is remained upon them, then he could pray nawafil namaz on them or have them performed on payment. So you can actually pay people to do this on the behalf of your parents. Pray sadaqah on their behalf, complete their qaza fasts, and fulfill the obligation of their hajj. Whatever you do, both of you will be rewarded. Meaning you and your parents. So don't think that if you do something for your parents, only they will get the reward, right? You will get it as obviously, and on top of that, the reward will be doubled, and you will get some, and your parents will get some reward. So apart from this, goodness to parents carries double rewards. one for the action itself and one for the benevolence towards parents, right? I just mentioned this, right? So if you do a good deed, like doubles in rewards. So one for the fact that you did it and one for the fact that it's going towards your parents. And lastly, that it was narrated by the Holy Prophet that a man approached him and asked whether his parents have any rights upon him after their death. And the Holy Prophet replied, yes, pray namaz for them, seek forgiveness on their behalf, and respect their tradition and be good to their relatives. So I'm just going to end that topic here because there's just so many more hadith and things that explain how you should treat your parents. But I'm glad of how many things we discussed so far. We've discussed, how to treat your parents if they're not, Muslim or Shia, how to treat your parents if they're kafir, how to treat your parents if they're not even alive, how to treat your parents, if you are very, very sinful, if you have a lot of sins, how can you redeem yourself? And we just talked about some of the rewards of treating your parents well and some of the punishments for not treating your parents well. So just with that to end, I want to mention some things about Bibi Fatima sallallahu alaiha, because we are in her days of mourning, and her shahadat is close. So I just wanted to mention that her shahadat just passed, and I want to talk about briefly the story of Fadak. We've all known this story, but I just want to talk about what it kind of means, maybe to me personally, and maybe you can relate to this. So Bibi Fatima, we know that the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had this property, Fadak, and it was a very, very nice, large property. And what was important about it was that it not only did it benefit the owner, but it also benefited the people of the city. So a lot of poor people were employed in Fadak. A lot of people benefited from this land. So it's not like Fadak was just for the Prophet, for the Ahlul Bayt, and it was just their property. Obviously, whatever they had, they helped that. They used that to help the people, to benefit the people. So there were a lot of people who were benefiting from this, a land of Fadak. So this property. So obviously, when the Prophet died, we all know that the enemies of Islam, they took away this land, right? They took it away. So they took away Bibi Fatima's rights because this land was given to her as a gift from her father. So it was rightfully hers. So when, they took it away, and when she, obviously Bibi Fatima was telling them, this is actually my right, this is my property, they had the audacity to make her appear in court and testify that this is my property. So I know during this day and age, women are really freely going out there, doing whatever you want to do. But back in that day, going to court as a woman was a big deal, especially if you're there in front of all these really important men, these oppressive, unjust people, right? All these oppressors. The fact that she had to go and stand in court and testify for her rights is a big deal. And they purposely did that because obviously they wanted to disrespect her. They wanted to take away her honor and her dignity because the Prophet wasn't there anymore. So, so many times Bibi Fatima is mentioned. It's mentioned that she is equivalent to a human huri, right? So she is compared to the huris of heaven. She was so pure, she was so gracious, she had so much dignity, right? And she was just so pure, and she had all this purity and goodness in her, and she was almost like a huri, right? She was compared to this angelic creature, and they like a flower, and they're telling someone so pure and so innocent to go and stand in front of all these oppressive, unjust men and stand in front of court, and they were gonna go look down upon her, and she has to really talk about her rights in front of them. That was a big deal at that time, the fact that they made her do that, but she did not back down. So she was still strong and confident, right? Just because she's, graceful and elegant doesn't mean that she's weak. Never underestimate someone. Never think they're weak. Never mistake grace and elegance for weakness, because they are not the same thing. She was so strong. She was so confident. And you see how Bibi Zainab treated the people in the court, how she had that, very, very confident voice. She said, that very famous speech in the court. So similarly, she got that from her mother. Her mother had to go in court and also speak for her rights. And when Bibi Fatima presented the proof that this is my land, the oppressors, they just threw it back in her face. They didn't even care about it. Whatever she said, they would deny it. They never even gave her back her rights. So not only did they take away her rights, they forced her to come to court to fight for her rights. And then even after she presented the right proof and she presented that this is my property, they threw it back. They said, no, we're not accepting this. They denied her, and they didn't ever give the land back. So that was just something that was that was really upsetting, because the fact that they did that. And just remember that Bibi Fatima, she passed away when she was 18. So all of these things happened when she was actually a teenager. So imagine someone who had to really go through all of that. And I just found it so beautiful how she was so elegant and graceful, but at the same time she had so much confidence, and she was so eloquent in her speech, and she didn't back down when someone was taking away her rights. Because sometimes we think that as a Muslim, or the people of the Ahlul Bayt, they're so kind and considerate, they'll let anything go, it's fine. But no, this story taught us that we should stand up for our rights. We have to be kind and compassionate and considerate towards other people, but the moment we are being oppressed, we have to stand up for ourselves, we have to stand up for other people as well. So that's just something that I wanted to just take away from this, that you can be elegant, you can be graceful, but you can also be confident and strong and stand up for your rights regardless of the situation. And just there's so many different stories that we could learn, so many different points that we can take away from her life. And honestly, I recommend everyone, I don't even have time to go through all of them, because she was such a beautiful, wonderful personality in her character, in her actions, in her words, in her speech, in her everything, that she's just a role model, not only for the youth, not only for just the women, but for men, for everyone, for all of humanity, not just for even Muslims. She is a role model for everyone, truly, and we can never stop learning more about her. So I recommend everyone to go home and just in her honor, for her sake, for Allah's sake, go and read up about her life, read some of the things she said, read some of the stories from her life, some of her actions, some just accounts of her lifetime, and just notice the influence she had on Islam. Because she raised 2 imams, and she was the wife of an imam, so she was actually caring for 3 imams and the Prophet, right? The Prophet says Abiha, right? That was her title, the mother of her father. So she was so caring, and she took care of the Prophet, right? The most important person in the world, in the universe. She took care of the first 3 imams. So the fact that, honestly, the concept of Velayat was protected because she was there. She raised 2 imams, she took care of the first imam, she married the first imam. So just to understand her status and her value in Islam is something we can never even begin to comprehend. So maybe we can reach a little closer to understanding her value by reading more about her life, really pondering about what she meant, how wonderful of a personality she was. And inshallah, Allah will give it in us to really understand and comprehend the value of her and of all the Ahlul Bayt. And we pray that Allah forgives our sins and gives us the motivation and the encouragement and the inspiration to treat our parents well, whether they be Muslim, whether they're non-Muslim, whether they're alive or dead. Inshallah, we will all in the future, starting from today, take the appropriate steps to respect our parents and fulfill all their rights. And hopefully we will all try to be the best Muslims we can be, to be the followers of Imam Mahdi alayhi salam when he returns. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching this segment, and inshallah we will see you next time on Youth Perspectives.